Hi everyone, thank you for joining the Fight with Teddy Atlas. I'm Teddy Atlas III, and joined as always by International Boxing Hall of Famer, my main man, my father, Teddy Atlas. How you doing, bud?
Good. I'm your son. I have to be doing good. And
You're my son.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm your father. I'm going back in the time machine. We're gonna do a time machine piece today, where we're gonna do mythical fights from the time machine, where we could just go to any era we want, that we hope that pleases the palate of you, the fans. So I guess I'm ahead of myself. I went back in the time machine, and somehow I got a little. I was in a time machine, but just so you know, it's a real time machine out there, guys. And they give you something else to talk about and put up there, And I was, looking at the fighters like, of course, Sam Langford, people like that. You guys know that. And we were going back, and Jack Johnson and all different. And then I got stuck there for a minute, and I was almost late for the show today. So I got a little thrown off, where I had gone back in age, and I became the son to my son. But I am the father to my son. So I just wanted to rectify that, get that cleared up. I'm sure I cleared it up with that explanation. I'm sure that makes it crystal clear. And I hope
with that new haircut, you are looking a lot younger, though. I will give you that.
That's my man Lou over in Brooklyn. 3 generations of barbers, straight from Italy. Can't get better than that. My dear friend John LaRocca brings me over there. We go together to get haircuts, and he's what we are in haircutting to boxing podcasts. He's the man. I hope we are the man too, and the men to all of you great people out there. And I want to just say, I hope everyone has a happy and safe Labor Day weekend. And I think, for the most part, there were no traditional fights. And I say traditional, I know there was a couple event type fights and a little bit off the grid type fights, but no boxing or UFC real fights to talk about that we thought would really generate, real interest. I know you guys are interested. I know you guys are interested in anything that has any combat assigned to it. I mean, if you had 2 chipmunks going at it, you'd probably say, hey, Ted, you missed that one? Come on, that chipmunk had a good left, But there were no real fights to speak about for the most part this week. So we're going to do, as I said, we're going to do some mythical matchups from the time machine and other boxing news. We'll try to hit on all the things that hopefully will satisfy you guys. And I hope you like last week's list of fighters with the greatest heart. I liked that list. I really did. I really enjoyed doing it. And I know there's always somebody left off it, like Matthew Saad Muhammad. I know that. There's always somebody left off. But that's the greatness. That's the fun of doing the list. That you're not gonna please everyone. You are gonna miss a couple. But then you guys and my son can come right up and say, hey Teddy, you missed this guy. And that kind of generates more conversation and makes it more interesting. So we're also going to do one this week, and it's a timely one. The one that I think will be great. Smaller fighters who beat bigger fighters. I think it goes obviously perfectly with the Canelo-Crawford fight coming up. So we like to try to fit things in there that makes sense. That makes sense. It just makes sense to do, great small fighters that fought great big fighters but won. Because I happen to think that well, don't tell anybody, but we don't want to let it out of the bag yet. But I think the smaller guy's going to win in this one. But keep that to yourselves. Keep that to yourselves. Because I know that there's going to be a few of my beautiful Mexican brothers and sisters that are going to probably be arguing with that a little bit. But anyway, let my son take it from here. Welcome to the fight with my son. I get that right? Yeah, my son and his father.
That's right. Thank you, bud. Yeah, as you said, no boxing to cover this week, and there's no UFC fights this past weekend. And we're not talking about that Misfits card with Tony Ferguson beating Salt Poppy or Dylan Dennis taking 10 seconds to choke out an influencer. So we decided that we're going to talk about the big one everybody's talking about and can't wait for it in 2 weeks from now. Terence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez. It's going to be at Allegiant Stadium, Las Vegas, live on Netflix. And next week, we're going to follow up, and we're going to get deeper into the preview and breaking down the X's and O's of this fight. But right now, I just want to throw out some news and touch on some new events that are going on around this fight. The first one is big news this week, and the internet's having a field day with it, that Canelo Alvarez's sparring partner is Boots Ennis for this fight. Now, with that being said, but I think it's very interesting. A lot of people out there are saying, hey, iron sharpens iron. This is going to help him beat Crawford. But I know my upbringing, being the son of a trainer, you never really had big-name fighters as sparring partners for these big marquee fights. I guess there's two ways to look at it. Just want to get your take. What do you make of it? Are people overthinking this? But what do you make of Boots Ennis being the sparring partner for Canelo?
I would pick spots. When I had a young fighter that wasn't there yet, you know. The camps you're talking about, I was blessed. I had a world champion, or we were going to fight for a world title. We were already up the ladder. And we were fighting for the world title. We couldn't go any higher. But when I had guys at Gleason's gym years and years ago, of course, and I was bringing them up, and they were a young prospect, and I wanted them to get experience, wanted them to get confidence. I would pick spots. And put them in with a known fighter, a top fighter, as long as I thought my guy could handle a couple rounds with him. I would always try to keep control where I thought I had the control, where I'm not going 5 rounds, 6 rounds like I would later on when they got to a certain level. I'd go 2 or 3 rounds. And not all the pros that were there wanted to go only 2 or 3. They were just warming up after 2 or 3. But I would, if I could get my way, and I got my way, otherwise I wouldn't do it. I would say, okay, I knew a guy was coming in town, top name, top fighter. And I thought my guy was at the point where he could be okay for 2 or 3 rounds. Plus, I wanted to know the temperament of that guy, that star, that top fighter. If he had the temperament that he looked to take guys' heads off just to do it because he was that temperament, no, I'm not going in there with him. I'm not doing that. But if I thought it was the kind of guy that we could work with in the right way, I would do it. And I would look to do it to gain confidence so my fighter could go 2 or 3 rounds with a top guy and walk out of there saying, hey, I can get there someday. I was able to go with this top guy, a world champion. And it gave me something to work with, to build off of that mental part of it, that emotional part of it, the confidence. So directly to your question, this is a whole different ball of wax here. You're right. When I had a guy in camp to fight for the world title, I'm not bringing another world champion in. I am not bringing another top fighter. I'm not getting into that ego stuff because it gets there. It gets there. I don't care what you say. We're not getting paid in the gym. The old timers told me that years ago. You ain't getting paid in the gym, Teddy. It's there. The gym to me was a classroom. It was always a class. It wasn't an arena. I was in plenty of gyms where it became an arena. Oh, plenty of them. I mean, Philadelphia was famous for that. But even the Kronk, and nothing wrong with it. But I was not letting my gym become an arena. I always had a private gym, and we were getting ready for one specific reason, one specific match. I didn't need a guy who's going to try to show that he was better than my guy, that he was a world champion and he belonged to that spot maybe, or that he could put something on his social media that, he got the better of my guy. Again, and my guy is one of the top guys we're talking about right now. So I avoided that. I would bring in specific sparring partners that knew how to be a sparring partner. Yeah, if I wanted some, I went over to him before the day started. Listen, I want you to do this. All right. I'm paying him. I have the right to do that. I want you to move more today. I want you to, I want you to press him a lot. You know what? There was a fight I was getting a guy ready for, and I was worried about the first couple rounds. So I said, when the bell rings, I want you to rush out of the corner and go right after him. And I was, obviously I had my guy ready because we were getting ready for that kind of fight plan, for the possibility that the opponent would come out that way. So I wouldn't look to get a boots Ennis. I mean, nothing wrong with that's what they want. That's fine. And I get it, the style, the size, the length. I understand. It's not a bad pick from that point of view. But for me, again, I never go down that road because I got my guy getting ready for a fight. I don't want to leave it in the gym. I don't want to get into that kind of war in the gym. No, I want to have control of all aspects of what the hell I'm doing in the gym to get ready for one night. So no, I wouldn't do that. I'd get the right sparring partners. If I thought I had a guy, I'd get guys that my guy could work with, and if he was having an off day, he could kind of, have his way and do what he wanted with the guy. I'd have one of them. I'd probably have 3 guys, sometimes 4, depending on where we were at, with the calendar when the fight was coming up. But I'd have one guy where my guy could do what he wanted in a certain way. I have another guy that would test my guy a little bit. So on those days, I might put that guy in 2 rounds. And if I'm doing 8 rounds that day, the other guys are doing the other 6. I would pick and choose. I knew what I had, and I knew what I wanted, and I knew where I wanted to go and get to. That's it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic and taken. It's great to hear you break it down that way of the thoughts that go into all of the events in the training camp and the selection of sparring partners, the amount of rounds. I thought, again, very interesting because a lot of the fans out there are saying this is going to help Canelo. He's sparring against a great fighter, world champion in Ennis. And like I said
and
before, iron sharpens iron. And maybe it will. But on the other side, it was interesting to hear your side of how, whether it's the overtraining or I think more the mental side. What if Boots is getting the best of him? How does that affect Canelo going into this fight? Why would you want to even put that doubt in your fighter's head going into such a big fight?
Obviously, Canelo's trainer been with him a long time. He's a hell of a trainer. Obviously, they know why they're doing it. They know what the heck they're doing. I'm not debating that. I'm not disputing. For me, everyone has their own, thoughts in anything they do. And in this specific business, that's my thought. I don't think that I would want too many highly, put it this way, I'll get right to the point. I wouldn't want wars with my guy who's been in 65 fights or 60 whatever, and is at that, 34 years old and getting ready for, maybe, well, he's been in a lot of big fights, but right now it's the biggest fight of his career. He's getting ready for this fight. I don't want to, if I have an older car that's got a lot of miles on the odometer, put it this way, I don't want to be taking it on the Autobahn. I don't want to take it for long drives at a high speed because it's an older car. I want to save it. I want to save it a little bit. So yeah, I would pick spots with Canelo, maybe 1 or 2 days to amp him up, but it would only be spots. It would only be spots with somebody that sharp. But again, his trainer, he knows what he's doing. He knows why he's doing it.
Athletic Greens introduces the new AG1 Next Gen. Now includes 5 clinically studied probiotic strains shown to support digestive and immune health with added vitamins and minerals. They've also now have new travel pack designs resulting in a much easier pour to improve the customer experience. So whether you guys are looking to boost your energy levels, support your immune system, or address gut health, Athletic Greens is the way to go. Simply visit athleticgreens.com/atlas to claim your special offer of 10 free travel packs with your first purchase. Yeah. The other thing I want to throw at you, bud, around this fight, about a month ago, they announced all the officials for this fight. The judges, and the referee for this bout. All my years growing up in boxing, I've never seen that happen. I've never seen it announced this far in advance. What do you make of that? Why for this fight is that different than any other fight? Why don't we get those announcements for all these fights then?
Because they want this to be the Academy Awards. Bang. They want this to be the Oscars. You know, Turki Al-Sheikh, I mean, obviously he's done a great job in boxing the last 2 years. He's given us fights that we didn't have. He's made boxing more relevant. He's helped the sport. He's helped the fans. Again, he unified the heavyweight title that wasn't unified for 25 years. You know, he's done a lot of good things. He didn't hide it. He said this is going to be a marquee. This is going to be a marquee event where he's putting his handprint on it, and where Dana White is putting his foot into the boxing pool for the first time, where he's partnering up with Turki Al-Sheikh, and in the future they're going to have a partnership. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Maybe it's going to be a league, a boxing league, whatever it's going to be. But this is basically this is the coming out party of that. This is that night when the big new restaurant opens up and you got the searchlights in the sky. And that's what this is, to let you know something special's coming. We are here in boxing now, and we're gonna do it in a big, big way. And as I said, this is their Oscars night. This is their Academy night. And that's why they're doing everything they want it to be big, and they want it to be loud, and they want it to be different. And you know what? What's different? This show we're doing right now. I love the direction you took this show. We didn't have any fights. We didn't have any fights to break down like we normally do. But we had plenty of boxing news, plenty of things to get into that we normally don't have time to get into because we're breaking fights down. And I kind of love this. I kind of love it. And I hope the fans love it, that we're able to go into areas in boxing today that I'm sure a lot of people would like to have a light shined on, but they never do.
Yeah, absolutely. But I wanted to ask you, sticking on this topic, and I think it's an interesting conversation for the viewers out there to understand the selection of these refs and the judges, and how the manager, the trainer, the promoter does have a say in this process. And what I'm getting at here, and what I would be very concerned with, is if I'm a backer of Terence Crawford, I don't like this list that I saw that was announced. Tim Cheatham is one of the judges in this fight. Now, we've talked about Tim Cheatham a ton on this podcast, and not for good reasons, right?
Sutherland and Cheatham, they would be the first guys called into the office on Monday if a national czar came in and said, I'm going to start investigating this sport. I'm starting to look at the things that Teddy Atlas talked about and a lot of other people talked about. I'm going to start, and that a lot of fans talk about, that they're leaving the sport because of the bad judging and officiating. I'm going to start to look at it. And the two guys I would say to you, sir, whoever you are, I would say, sir, it might be a good place to start with a guy named Sutherland and a guy named, yes, sir, I'm not making this name up. What is the name, Teddy? Cheatham.
He gave some scorecards that should never happen. One of them that stands out to me was the first fight between Tim Tszyu, and Fundora. He had Tszyu winning 116-112. He's the only judge that had him winning that fight. Fundora won that fight. There's been a bunch of them, but the one that really stands out is he had it 115-113 for Bivol versus Canelo. Obviously, that was a fight that I thought Bivol won handily. If Bivol loses the last round, that fight's a draw on his scorecard. I just want to hear from you, and let the fans know what goes into that of allowing or protesting to the officials that are announced for this fight.
Listen, you can't say as a manager or the people involved in with that fighter, you can't say who you want, but you can say who you don't want, and try to control things the best you can. If you can put a list of guys you can knock guys down. You can't pick them. I mean, that's picked by the organizations. The commission has some say about it, depending on if it's a world title fight or not a world title. Of course, this is for the titles, and the organizations put their guys in there. And the problem with, they don't do a rotating system enough. It's always the same guys. It's always the same guys, and in the same locales. Vegas, where you're always getting the same guys. And the problem with that is familiarity breeds contempt. We've all heard that, right? And it can also breed, well, contempt's bad, but it could breed other problems like corruption or slighting somebody or favoring somebody, because obviously the people that are involved with those fighters that they want to win, whether it's the promoter, mostly the promoter, right? They wind up having a familiarity and a relationship with the judges. And if you have the same judges doing their fights all the time, the same promoters, because there's only a certain amount of promoters in this sport that do really fights all the time, especially at this level. There's only like 5 of them, right? 5 or 6 of them. You guys know who they are. So we got the promoters that are the lifeblood of this sport, that do the smaller promotions around the country, out west and in New York and in different areas. There's no doubt about that. You have those guys, whether it's the Joe DeGuardias or the Lou DeBellas, that's mixed. He used to do some of the smaller fights in New York. He's also involved, in a partnership with some of the bigger fights, of course, too. He's got an ego, so I don't want Lou saying, "Oh, I do big fights." No, I know you do, Lou, but you also, I'm giving you credit. You used to do the smaller club fights in New York. And you have a few guys, more than a few, across the country that do those fights. And that is the lifeblood of the sport, because without those guys, you don't get a fighter to the big nights. But now we're talking about the big nights. So you got the promoters that are doing the big ones, that are on television and everything else. And if you got the same officials all the time, which we're talking about, you do. I mean, just look, every time there's a big fight, you got the same guys for the most part. And again, I think that you can help a lot by rotating and getting new blood in there. And also geographically looking and saying, don't keep putting every time you put a fight in Vegas, don't put the same guys from there. Bring in guys from different locales. Mix it up a little bit, because you have these promoters that have a relationship and a familiarity where the judges are more prone to go towards them. Why? Why, Teddy? Why? Because they go out to dinner with them? They give money under the table? They do go out to dinner. I'm not saying they give money under the table. I'm not saying that. But they know that those are the guys that butter their bread. Those are the guys that put food on their table for their families. Without those guys, there's no fights to promote. They know those are the guys promoting all the fights. So if those guys aren't getting the decisions that those guys want. Guess what? You'll be one of the guys that ain't working. So we need a national commission. We need a lot of help. But we're not going down that path. But my son brought up a lot of interesting things here. If I'm with Canelo, I think I'm happy with Cheatham. But if I'm with Crawford, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, wait a minute. Hold on. This guy had he had Canelo over Bivol.
No,
he had Bivol over Canelo. That's why I meant to say. I'm sorry. He had it that close. How he had
115, 113.
Yeah.
Now listen, there's another judge on this card who will be officiating this fight, Crawford versus Canelo, Steve Weisfeld, who also scored at 115, 113. I've more singled out Tim Cheatham because of the inconsistencies.
Because of his past record.
Yeah, I didn't think Loma lost to Haney. That was one of them. I just talked about the Zoo versus Fandora, number 1. That one, unbelievable. Richardson Hitchens versus Lemos, way too wide. Just recently, we watched a great fight. Figueroa versus Joet Gonzalez. Way too wide for Figueroa. There's been too many examples of that. And when you started off saying, it's always the same guys, I'm okay with the same guys, bud, if they're the right guys and they are consistent.
I hear you, but you're right. Excuse me. You're putting out the right things here, bud. And it's a very interesting, important conversation that's shining a light on dark places that just don't get light shined on them.
Let the viewers know, though, if you're the trainer, if you're Bomac in this case for Terence Crawford, and you say absolutely not, I'm protesting that judge, I want him replaced. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, you're telling the manager, really, for the most part. I would tell the manager, I would say, hey, we can't have this guy. You gotta put it in with the commission. Say that, this is why we don't want this guy and we want someone else. You can't say who you want, but you can put in for rejecting somebody. And you hope that you get your way. I have no idea what Crawford's people are thinking with Cheatham. No idea. But again, just to make sure we're clear on this, if I'm with Crawford, I'm thinking, Jesus, this is a guy who had it real close with Canelo and Bivol. And for me, I had Bivol winning 11 rounds. All right, even if you said 10, you'd be kind of generous. But to have it that close, I mean, come on. And then the other fights you talked about, I mean, he's got a track record where the problem with him isn't just that he's so off and the numbers are so off. They're off for always the A fighter. That's the thing that puts a light on in my mind, that puts a danger light on, is that he's always, Canelo's the A guy always, right? We know that. We don't have to dispute that. So it's not like he's on the side of the B guy. He's always on the side of the guy that the promoter would want to win. That's what bothers me. But then again, that's why some people love me and some people do not.
Well, I would be putting in a complaint if I'm with Team Crawford, especially when you're plus 250 to win by knockout. Vegas is telling you, most people are telling you, it's probably going to be by decision if he is going to get the win, not by knockout, being the smaller man, moving up. Very interesting topic and something we're going to keep tabs on, and we'll see how this one plays out. As we keep moving on and we stick with this monster mega fight, Crawford versus Canelo, there's a lot of people saying that, listen, Terence Crawford is 37 years old now going into this fight. He's the older man. We know he's the smaller man. He's jumping up all the way to 168. And some are picking holes in his resume. What would you say to those naysayers?
I would say I love Crawford. I would say he passes the eye test. Yeah. I would say the resume is the resume. He passes the eye test. Everyone he's been in there, he's won. He's won convincingly. I know with the Matrimore fight, people want him to win big. It was his first time stepping up in weight to 154, and it was a guy with 300 amateur fights. Only had 10 pro fights, but he had 300 amateur fights. With the best international fighters in the world, and he had a very deliberate style, a very distinct style, a very awkward style in its own way. So people don't look at that. They don't look at the things obviously that I'm looking at, being a trainer, being in the business of boxing my whole life, 50 years of it. So I'm not disputing that Canelo has a better resume. I'm not disputing that. That's not disputable. He does. But I've picked and I've seen through the history of the sport, many fighters beat other fighters that had better resumes than them. Yeah, it comes down to styles, and it comes down to how consistent you are in the areas you need to be consistent with the talents you have, and how you put those talents forward versus the other guy's talents. I think that Crawford will deal with the bigger man with his timing, with his legs. I know he's 37 years old, but he's not a used up. I used the analogy earlier of a car. This ain't a car with a lot of miles on the odometer, buddy. But it's not. I know he's 37 years old, but this is like going and looking at one of those vintage classic cars, and you look at it and you say, oh, I love that car. Man, but it must have I don't know, and the motor must be getting old, this must be getting old. And then the guy says, no. It hasn't been on the road that many times. I've kept it in good condition in the garage. I've never taken it on a lot of tough drives. I've never gone crazy and started driving into terrain that would wear it out. And then you say, oh, okay, even though it's an old car, it's a fresh old car. It's not used up. And that's how I look at Crawford, really, through those same kind of lens where, yeah, he's 37 years old. He's not used up. He hasn't been in a million wars. He takes care of himself. He lives the right life. He's a family man. I'm not concerned about that. I'm not saying it can't show up. You never know when Father Time's going to show up. But I'm not going in there saying I'm really worried about that. In some ways, I might say I'm more worried about Canelo getting old, even though he's a couple years younger. He's 3 years younger. I'd be more concerned about him getting old because he has had 67 or 66 fights, whatever that number is. I'd be more concerned about that because I don't judge, and the old timers didn't either, fighters chronologically as much as I do by the amount of fights they've had and the amount of punches they've taken. I judge them that way. I judge their age that way. So in that way, I'm looking at the opposite of most people. I'm looking at Canelo maybe getting, you never know when he's going to get old all of a sudden in the ring. And again, the resume, I get it. I'll say it again for all my beautiful Mexican fans out there, and you guys are great. Canelo's got the better resume. But the resumes ain't fighting each other. The fighters are. the fighters are getting in there and fighting, not the resumes. I haven't seen a resume throw jab yet. Have you, bud? You've been around with me your whole life. Have you seen a resume throw jab? No, I don't think so. So everyone Crawford has been put in with, he's beaten. That I know. And I know the way he's beaten them. I know how smart he is. I know how talented he is. I know how special he is. That there are certain qualities he has that I'm banking on that are not the qualities that you can really put on paper. They're not the qualities that there's a real metric for, that is easy to identify, like I said, on paper. Oh, speed, power, elusiveness, legs. No, there's other talents, other qualities, and he has those.
Yeah, and that leads me to one thing I want to ask you. Talking about qualities, one of the special qualities of Terence Crawford is his ability to switch hit. You said it in the past, the best switch hitter since Joe DiMaggio, right? And I bring that up
No,
because
no, Mickey Mantle.
since Mickey Mantle, I'm sorry, I'm thinking the Yankees since the Mick. But as I think of this fight, I'm thinking that Canelo's going to be what Canelo always is. Is there going to be any surprises from Crawford's end? And where I'm going with this is he switches a lot. Is he better at lefty? Is he better at righty? But does he come into this fight as purely maybe a southpaw? Do you do something drastic? And the reason why I say that is Canelo struggled versus southpaws. He struggled versus Lara many years ago. He struggled against Billy Joe Saunders before getting the stoppage and breaking his orbital bone. And he hasn't fought a southpaw in his last 4 fights now since John Ryder. Is that something that Crawford's camp you think will be thinking about doing? Or you're taking away from the great Crawford and you allow him to go do what he does and beat to his own drum?
No, you let him do what he does. You let this guy's a chemist. He's a scientist. He's a genius. He is. And all the great ones are in their own right. And you let him do what he does. He will get just a good designed strategic fight plan, a basis, just a basis, an overview given to him by Bomac and the other two guys that are in the camp training. He's got 3 people around him he trusts that train, and they do a great job. I'll say it again. So does Canelo's men, of course. But I'm talking right now about Crawford. They do a great job. I have never seen them not have one of their fighters prepared for the right strategy. That's important. I've seen plenty of fighters go in there, good fighters, and they didn't have the right strategy. I was like, what the? You didn't know who you were fighting? You didn't look at tape? Somebody didn't tell you? You didn't know the guy does this? It's like you're finding it out for the first time, and it's showing. But never, ever with the Crawford team. They always have, I'm not just talking about their top guy, Crawford, all their fighters, they always have them with the right fight plan. Always. And I can't say that about too many people in this business, I'll be honest. So I have no doubt they will do what they've always done. They will have a fight plan that they think makes sense, that will be figured out, and they've been doing in the gym, going over it in the gym. But then they will have plan B. And plan B will be, hey, champ, go do what you got to do. Go do what you got to do, champ. You know, because they trust him, because they know that's one of the qualities that you can't put on paper that I was alluding to earlier. I'm so glad we're having this conversation and it's with you. And that you're opening me up to bringing out stuff that I wouldn't have brought out otherwise, to be honest. But one of those qualities is his IQ, Crawford being him, his IQ and his instincts. I'm going to make a real strong statement. First of all, I think he's the greatest switch hitter I've ever seen in boxing. I mean, Andre Ward's pretty damn good too. There's been a few really good ones, but he might be the best switch hitter I've ever seen in this sport. And number 2, he has as good. I'm not going to say the greatest because there was so many great fighters, and I had the pleasure of seeing them, if not in person, on film, up at Custom Models with Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton's great film collection, biggest film collection in the world, Big Fights, Inc. But he has as good instincts as any fighter I've ever seen. That's the qualities. And I'm glad you made me come out with this. That's the qualities that I'm betting on. That people don't see. They see a smaller guy. They see a guy they think didn't do as good as he should have done with Matrimov in their mind because they don't know what they don't know. But I see that. And I think Canelo, before the night is over, is going to see it. And I'm taking nothing away from Canelo. It's going to be a very, very, very interesting fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a very interesting topic. We took a lot of different angles here to cover it. This fight opened up Terence Crawford plus 200 underdog. It's now down to plus 150. Things are tightening up with 2 weeks to go. And we'll keep tabs on that and see how it plays out and changes into the lead up. This is the biggest fight, bud, in quite some time. Of course, we just had Tyson Fury and Usyk on Disputed Heavyweight Championship, and we had it twice. We also had it at light heavyweight with Bivol and Better Beef twice. But this is the biggest fight in 20, 25 years, maybe. I mean, you got to go back to the hype of, De La Hoya versus Mayweather or Mayweather versus Pacquiao. So with that being said, bud, just makes me think.
Bud, can I interrupt you? Because you're right. You're on something here. I would say Pacquiao and Mayweather. Yeah, because that was huge because of just all the dimensions, all the social media, just the attention, everything that people made it. You know, a big fight becomes a big fight, not only because it's a great fight or potentially a great fight, but people make it a big fight. You know, Barnum and Bailey, he made the circus a special event because he made it a special event. He promoted it and said, I demand it's going to be a special event because I'm going to make everybody think that it's a special event. And that's what makes these fights extra big. And you're right. This is the biggest one since that. And there's been other fights that were much better and there were greater fights. The fight of the century with Ali and Frazier. I mean, that's number one in my mind. You had Hearns and Leonard. You had Leonard and Hagler. I mean, all these, they were great. But this one's getting so much attention. And Pacquiao and Mayweather got that kind of attention. I hope that's the only similarity to it. I hope it doesn't become disappointing the way that fight did, where people said that at the end of the day, and rightfully so, it was very disappointing, and it was at least 5 years too late. I hope, and see, nobody else has touched on this. And again, you brought me here. You're probably going to get me killed because you brought me here, but you brought me here. There will be people that want to hear this, and there'll be plenty that don't. But I hope that it's not, at the end of the day, what we're talking about saying, yeah, this fight happened a few years too late. I think that's potential of that being there. And nobody's talked about that because in their mind, they're both in their prime. Until they're not in their prime. Until all of a sudden Canelo shows up and his legs are slow and he's not closing the gap so fast. And Crawford is taking advantage of that. Or whatever it is. Whatever side of it it's on. All of a sudden they're going to say, oh, Canelo should have fought him 5 years earlier or 3 years earlier. He would have beat him. So I hope we're not getting that. But I see, and I'm not wishing it, it's a fight that I want to see. But I see the possibility of that cloud hanging over it.
Yeah, no, those great thoughts there. And that leads me, I want to ask you, we're talking about huge fights, dream matchups. You touched on earlier, going into the time machine. If you could go into that time machine, what fights do you want to make?
One I would love to see. And for some people, I don't know if they can appreciate because the history might be limited to the modern era. And see, that's where sometimes I don't want to lose people, but that's where I might lose them. But I'm not going to be afraid to go where I think would be a good answer to your question for a fight that I think would be just great and I want to find out. And that would be, again, a fight that a lot of people might not be familiar with one half of it. But the great Henry Armstrong, the only man to win 3 full weight classes, featherweight, lightweight, welterweight. Then he fought for the middleweight and he won, but they made it a 15-round draw. They robbed him. But 3 full weight classes. He had almost 300 fights, like 110 knockouts. I mean, the greatest fighting nickname ever, Homicide Hank. Come on, you don't beat that. The great Henry Armstrong, he just came at you and kept coming. I want to see him fight Roberto Duran, hands to stone. There, bang. You can't top that. For me, bud. I know there'll be people, oh, Teddy, I didn't know Armstrong, whatever. That's I'm sorry. I feel bad for you. I am. I do. I feel bad for you, buddy. But but I can help you. I can tell you about them where you can learn. I would also I'll tell you another one real quick. And then I want you, Aaron Pryor. I loved Aaron Pryor before drugs destroyed him. Hey, people don't, it's just a shame. They don't know how special Aaron Pryor was, how he destroyed a great fighter in Alexis Arguello. Just broke him down, just kept coming from all angles. How he won the title against a great fighter, Kid Pompalay, Antonio Cervantes, and he got dropped in that fight. And then what did he do? While the referee was going over to count, what do you think he did? He did a backflip. He did a backflip after being knocked down. And then he started going after him, waving his arms, windmilling his arms. He was that kind of dynamo. He was that kind of guy that didn't believe he could be beat. I would love to see him with the hands of stone, too. Oh, you getting me? See, that's why I didn't want you to get me started.
Yeah, this big fight gets you itching for bigger fights and these dream fights. You touched on Duran. I want to see Duran versus Manny Pacquiao. Or how about Floyd Mayweather versus Sugar Ray Leonard? Right? How about Arthur Betterby versus Roy Jones? The pressure versus the athlete and the speed. Touching on these guys, how about Terence Crawford versus Pernell Whitaker? Or a lot of people maybe get upset with this, but Canelo versus Benavidez? Can we ever get that?
That's going to be too late, though. And that's going to be, because if we did get it, I don't think we'll get it. It depends what happens in the Crawford fight, obviously. But if we did get that, if Canelo was to lose, obviously they would say that, he should have took that fight earlier. But then again, they can't say it because he's the one who didn't take it. He's the one who kept the fight from happening earlier. And the way I look at that, to answer your question, Bud, you're probably not going to get it. Doesn't make me a genius. It doesn't make me the Mason Kreskin or Notre Dame to say this, because if we were going to get it, if Canelo wanted it, we would have got it already. I don't think he's going to want it when he's older. Is he really going to want to fight a beast like that, a big, naturally bigger guy who's that kind of fighter, who throws that kind of punches, that consistently, with that kind of work rate, that kind of confidence, right? And younger. Does he want to fight that guy at this point in his career? I think he'd want to be a little younger. If he was going to fight him, I don't think it's going to be now. Like I said, I think he would have said yes 3 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And the last one I'll leave you with, Bud, is how about Usyk versus Holyfield? Cruiserweight, heavyweight, any weight?
Yeah, I mean, that's so special, Bud, because they were both the greatest cruiserweight champs of all time. Both of them. Take your pick. Holyfield's the greatest cruiserweight champ of all time? Okay. Usyk's the greatest cruiserweight champ? Okay. And they both should have been gold medalists. Usyk won the gold medal. The Holyfield got it robbed by the referee. He should have been the gold medalist, in the Olympics. So they would have had that going together. And, and they both were the little guys that stepped up and beat bigger guys to win the heavyweight title. They were both the little engine that could, in certain ways. So what a fight. What a fight that would have been. And when you mention guys like Pernell Whitaker, the defensive master that he was, and of course Mayweather and those guys fighting guys I would love to see them fight the great offensive fighters that also were complete packages, but were great offensive fighters to test against their great defense. That's what I look for. Stuff like that.
Yeah. That's a great Great episode. I really enjoyed it. I think it was a different angle and approach, and covering this big fight. I hope all the viewers out there agree and enjoy it as well.
One more. Can I throw one more? See, you got me going. That's why I didn't want you to put it on me. I wanted you, and you did it, but I didn't want to, because if you put it on me to make the matches, we'll be going to Kingdom Come. We'll be going forever. We'll be going into the next era of boxing. We won't stop. But who wouldn't want to see Smoking Joe Frazier and a young Mike Tyson? I mean, right? I mean, come on.
We could go for days. I mean, I like to see Tyson versus Sonny Liston. But there's so many, and when you talk about these big fights, you get excited, and you talk about,
And the reason what you want to see, I'm going to piggyback off that. You want to see Tyson Lee. I know why. See, you're a boxing person. That's why. Where a lot of people wouldn't even go that deep, to be honest. But not only because they were great fighters and great punchers, both of them, great punchers. Liston was bigger, of course, taller, his size. But great punchers. But they were both intimidators. They were both great intimidators. And Liston was the original. He was the original boogeyman. And they were both boogeymen. They were both boogeymen and intimidators. And who would intimidate who in that one?
Yeah, that lead up, that presser, that would be a lot of fun. But this was a lot of fun. And before we wrap it up, again, we're going to be back next week, go more in-depth, the X's and O's, Teddy breaking down Crawford versus Canelo with his preview. But before we sign off, bud, any final thoughts for this week?
No, it was great. I'm great that you took us in the direction you took us. Thank you for doing that. I think the fans are going to thank you for that. This was conversational. This was roundtable. This was boxing. This was just having fun talking about the sport that we love. And I hope that all the fans loved it as much as we did. That's why we do it. We do it for them. And keep an eye out for the list coming out this week. Like we said, the list of the great smaller guys that fought the great bigger guys, and the smaller guys won, because we're getting you ready for Crawford and Canelo. I know that's going to get me in trouble, because people are going to, wait a minute, Teddy. I get the part about you giving us smaller guys against bigger guys. That's great, getting us ready. But you're saying you only gave us the smaller guys who beat the bigger guys. So in other words, you're saying already that Crawford's going to win. Listen, I like Crawford, but there's no sense in doing a list unless really you're taking the guy that is the underdog to make the list interesting. For me, that's what makes it interesting. It's the David and Goliath thing. Can David beat Goliath? Can the little guy beat the bigger guy? Because most people think automatically, the bigger guy's going to crush him. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's this, he's that. But there's been times that's happened, but there's been plenty of times it hasn't happened. And that's the part that I find more interesting, is to show that. And I like showing it anyway for the fight of life. Because I always say that, for me, what I like about this podcast is that everybody's in a fight. It's just a matter of what you fight for. And I use boxing to connect the dots to everybody's fight. So there's plenty of people out there that you're the underdog, you're the little guy, you're the little engine that probably should, you just don't know you could yet. And sometimes you might feel like, hey, I don't have a chance with these behemoths, with these Goliaths, I'm the little guy, maybe in stature, maybe in other ways. Maybe you're the smaller business. Maybe you're the new guy on the block. No. You can beat the bigger guy. You can beat the bigger guy. Listen to us. Look at the history of this sport. Look at this list. You can beat the bigger guy. Go beat him.
You got me motivated to go. But everybody be on the lookout for those lists that he just touched on. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe. We will see you guys again next week.